Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live broadcast, Proposed Rule for the Medicare Clinical Diagnostic Laboratory Test Payment System. I am Judy O'Rourke of LabRoots, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We are delighted to bring you this educational web seminar presented by LabRoots. For more information, please visit labroots.com. We have a few important announcements before we begin. This webcast is designed to be interactive, and we encourage you to ask questions during the event. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found by clicking on the green Q&A button at the lower left of the presentation window. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. You can enlarge the slide window by clicking on the screen icon in the lower right-hand corner of the slide window. If you have any technical problems viewing or hearing this presentation, please click on the support button at the top right of your presentation window or submit your problem through the green Q&A button lower left. I would now like to introduce today's speaker, Jerry Stringham, President of Medical Technology Partners. He has worked as a reimbursement strategy consultant since the 1980s, when he began providing reimbursement consulting to diverse device, diagnostic, and pharmaceutical companies. Jerry holds a BS in mechanical engineering from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and an MBA from Harvard Business School. He has been part of 5 medical device startup organizations operating out of New England and has grown MTP's client list to over 150 clients. Jerry founded Medical Technology Partners in 1998 to fill the growing need for business-oriented reimbursement consulting. His experience in industry, including as a principal in the health economics practice of a major CRO, brings expertise to new technology reimbursement challenges. I will now turn it over to Jerry for his presentation.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today and hearing about the perspectives on changing reimbursement in the laboratory system. I've been part of the healthcare reimbursement system since the 1980s, and right now we're facing one of the seminal moments for payment for laboratory-developed tests. If you're a company who makes hospital inpatient products, 1983 was the change when DRGs came into play. In 1998, the hospital outpatient system went from being a cost-based system to a prospective payment system. In 1993, physician services went from being usual and customary charges to a system based on relative value units. Well, right now, this law, this change, is the beginning of a massive change in the way that diagnostic tests are going to be paid for. And you have an opportunity to participate in it, and you certainly would want to know how your tests or how your companies would be taken effect. So that's what we're here about, is to share this information. So what is the presentation about? It's about the proposed rule for the Medicare Clinical Diagnostic Laboratory Test Payment System. This was published in the Federal Register on October 1st of this year, so this is hot off the press. It was first previewed by Department of Health and Human Services on September 25th. They're asking for public comment, so comments to the proposed rule, this is your big opportunity to make a statement, is due by November 24th of 2015. If you want to know what this rule is and read it yourself, it's the address, the URL is right there on this slide, and I certainly encourage you to do so. So what is our objective? Our objective is to alert you to some upcoming proposed changes in how Medicare will pay for clinical diagnostic laboratory test, that's CDLT. Alert participants to key reimbursement proposals that could affect laboratory developed tests, that's a LDT, so that's different. And make sure that participants know how to access the source document, that's on the previous page, and alert participants to Medicare's potentially changing congressional intent to the law that was passed last year that laid the groundwork for this. And I think some of the proposed changes are harmful to companies, and they need to be involved. What is important about laboratory-developed tests? Laboratory-developed tests are one of the foundations of personalized medicine. So, personalized medicine is kind of a buzzword. It's also called precision medicine in some fields. It's another permutation of the same thing. The whole idea of healthcare under personalized medicine is to deliver the right care to the right patient at the right time, personalized to their own individual genome, structure, disease, and so on. LDTs now have been put under FDA enforcement discretion, but the FDA has promised change. The enforcement discretion means that there is no 510K or de novo or PMA required. So LDTs have had a license to go to market without notifying and having a formal application to the FDA. LDTs are, by definition, are invented, developed, and run in the same single location in a lab that is CLIA certified. LDTs often have multiple inputs like biomarkers and other data, and often an algorithm that are combined to provide some useful diagnostic information to a patient or to their professional. So what is the historical context for Medicare's proposed rule published on October 1st? What brought this about? Well, on April 1st of 2014, the Protecting Access to Medicare Act of 2014, known as PAMA, was enacted into law. Section 216 of PAMA, which is entitled Improving Medicare Policies for Clinical Diagnostic Laboratory Tests, begins to change the Medicare payment system for clinical lab diagnostic tests by establishing a market-based payment system for the Clinical Lab Fee Schedule, CLFS. This law covered much more than just the laboratory-developed test. At the time it passed, it made turned a lot of heads for other reasons. The healthcare reimbursement system was moving from a coding system called ICD-9 to ICD-10. That law changed the implementation date from 2014 to 2015, much to the shock of many people. It provided a fix on a temporary basis, to physician fee payments. It also, part of this provision was called for a change in the Medicare regulatory body, something that's kind of referred to as diagnostic MACs, to implement policy coverage. That particular provision has not been addressed, or it looks like it won't be addressed by CMS. But most significantly here, and for this talk, the Section 216 talks about a market-based payment system that changes the way that CMS determines payment. Traditionally, the payments have been traditionally the payments have been made on a fee schedule basis, that have been determined by a variety of methods. And the paradigm shift now is causing for the methods to go towards more market-based economics. Thank you. What is important about the clinical lab fee schedule payment system? Medicare is a system, is insurance that covers people 65 years and older, and some disabled people. A lot of people, a lot of tests, it's a big part of your business. Medicare establishes payment via the schedule, and Medicare also is the key influencers in how commercial insurers view new diagnostic technology. They're basically the opinion leaders. So when Medicare has put it through this change, even though Medicare itself is approximately 50 million patients, the more than 100 million commercial insurers and 68 million under the Medicaid program are also significantly impacted. So Medicare controls the coding, coverage, and payment amounts for the coding for all systems and coverage and payment for Medicare recipients. They implement coverage and payment amounts through either national coverage determinations. For example, a company called Exact Sciences developed a test called Cologuard, and if there's no NCD, then coverage is made through the local coverage determinations, and they're handled by the 12. There's 12 jurisdictions of Medicare administrative contractors, currently run by 8 different companies across the United States. So each have jurisdiction in their area. For example, Palmetto is one Medicare administrative contractor, or MAC. They control policy for the Virginias, North and West Virginia and Virginia, and the Carolinas, South and North Carolina. So they cover those 4 states, for example. Are test semantics confusing? You may want to know. PAMA defined Advanced Diagnostic Laboratory Test and gave it preferential reimbursement status. So, listen to that, preferential reimbursement status. So they've created a category of test that they want to help. They are not looking to cut off at the knees. That's what Congress did. And many of the laboratory tests could fall under this definition of an ADLT. The ADLT definition became part of PAMA while many national organizations were arguing with the FDA about what should be regulated and whether the FDA was going to now issue its enforcement discretion. This is not the same or has really anything to do with what was going on with the FDA. These are parallel programs that can act independently of other. One really is about a payment system, and one is about the regulatory approval. And in fact, as this law was being passed, the people involved with writing the law were aware of the issues around the FDA and deliberately wrote it in a way that would allow it to be implemented separately. PAMA defines new FDA cleared or approved tests as ADLTs. However, you do not have to be FDA cleared or approved to be an ADLT. It's just that it automatically conveys that preferred reimbursement status. The Association of Molecular Pathology, largest group of professional associations of pathologists in the country, has argued that LDTs should be called laboratory developed procedures instead of laboratory developed tests. Other national organizations also like the term molecular tests, which is often a term used for genetic or genomic tests that use DNA and RNA biomarkers. But one MAC, Palmetto, defined a different term for a molecular diagnostic test. And Palmetto, which is the MAC and has been the most active in defining reimbursement policy in the country among the Medicare contractors, defined an MDT as any test that involves the detection or identification of nucleic acids like DNA and RNA, proteins, chromosomes, enzymes, cancer chemotherapy sensitivity, or any other metabolite. The test may or may not include multiple components. An MDT may consist of a single mutation analysis identification, or may or may not rely upon an algorithm or other form of data evaluation and derivation. So it's very comprehensive, and it also, I think, it speaks to the powerful tools that are available to help identify a patient's condition and prognosis. So this is the broadest definition out there really for diagnostic testing. So let's take a break. I've been throwing a whole lot of acronyms at you. So see if you remember, which codes represent which. So CDLT, ADLT, LDT, LDP, and MDT. So here we go. There they all are. Clinical Diagnostic Lab Test, Advanced Diagnostic Lab Tests, Laboratory Developed Tests, Laboratory Developed Procedures, and Molecular Diagnostic Test. All in the same family, but they mean different things, and which one you are, may make the semantical difference of which one you are may make a difference. And a reason to comment on this rule, or at least understand the rule, is so you end up in the playing field that you want to be in when it comes to reimbursement. So what does the rule do? It's moving to market-based payment. All clinical lab tests can be called CDLTs, but payment has historically been figured out and adjusted administratively by CMS. Tests are described with a code, and you may have heard of a CPT code, which is a coding system controlled by the American Medical Association, or CMS has a system called HCPCS. And the values for each of these independent diagnostic tests are put into the clinical lab fee schedule and published in the proposed rule and then annual rule by CMS. Often the initial and changed pricing has been very unpopular with the labs running the test, as has been the methodology. Congress, in the PAMA rule, bypassed the CMS historical approach. Reporting labs, though, under this process will be required to tell CMS who tests were sold to, both in terms of test volume and price. So it is required of manufacturers of tests to tell CMS how much they got paid for their tests. It's a market-based pricing system. Tests sold in year one will be reported to CMS during the first quarter of next year. At least that's the plan. So in 2016, by the end of the first quarter, we will begin to see what data is available. And CMS will use 2016 data to establish 2018 payment. So CMS will use a weighted median from all the reporting labs will be calculated, and CMS will use that price for the test in all of calendar year 2018. So it's calendar year 3. So essentially they collect data in one year. The next year they evaluate the data and they incorporate it into future years' fee schedules. So ADLTs, fork in the road. Most CDLTs can be sold by a number of labs, and a number of companies can develop tests. For Medicare, and the clinical lab fee schedule establishes payment. PAMA in the proposed rule published is a reporting nightmare for labs, with lots of recognized tests run by themselves, competitors, and also being paid by commercial insurers, as well as Medicare. ADLTs will be different because they will be unique from the one individual lab that developed the test, and the term ADLT avoids the confusing semantics of some of the other acronyms of alphabet soup that are proposed before. When ADLTs were called LDTs, the labs were often so unique and so new that they would not qualify for a national coverage determination. So each of the individual MACs would set up their own local coverage determinations for the lab in their jurisdiction and set the coverage and payment rules based on that. ADLTs and the preferential reimbursement. Congress seems to have recognized that these ADLTs are going to be key to personalized medicine. What is it about personalized medicine that has people excited? Well, the idea of giving a drug only to somebody that benefits is one of them, and targeting the right therapy for the right person. So there's initiatives all the way up to the White House to encourage precision and personalized medicine. The law defines 3 ways a test could possibly become an ADLT. Congress didn't want innovative technologies to be bogged down with the old approaches, which has huge delays in coverage and huge delays in establishing fair reimbursement. If a test was recognized as an ADLT, Congress wanted a way for them to come up with a unique code that didn't rely on the AMA CPT process, which can take 18 months or more, or other CMS coding approaches. The unique test, the ADLT, is market introduction could be done at the company's own list price. So if you have a new ADLT, you set the price, not crosswalking and not some of these other techniques that CMS has used to establish payments. Several months later, after your provider reports actual commercial sales and actual price, the weighted median calculation for that specific test is used. And if too low compared to the original list price, the lab service provider may owe CMS money. I think the cutoff is somewhere around 30%. So, if you list the price at $2,000 and it's 30% below that, below $1,400, you'd expect to provide a rebate. At least that's the way the law appears to be implemented. So, what is the reaction to the proposed rule? Because we've been waiting since PAMA was first introduced for CMS to read the rule and begin writing regulations around the rule. Well, we could tell that CMS was changing things. The original rule talked about DNA, RNA, or proteins as being components of the test of an ADLT. Well, CMS said we don't really need proteins, so they just said DNA and RNA. They added a distinction saying that the test had to demonstrate clinical uniqueness. And, our impression is that clinical uniqueness is a bit of a slippery slope. It requires some interpretation. And in the hospital outpatient system, when a new device is introduced, it's eligible for a pass-through payment for a couple of years. CMS introduced a concept, so the new device must show a substantial clinical improvement over something else that was already available, or what it might replace. And they've used very strict interpretation of what that is, and not provided the pass-through for devices. And the concern might be here that worthy tests that meet the definition as intended by Congress for an ADLT will not meet it here. And then finally, a very restrictive process defining algorithm was proposed, which would further limit ADLT definitions. CMS held a public meeting on October 18th, which myself and some of my colleagues were able to attend. CMS asserted that the agencies changed laws passed by Congress all the time, and that the CMS legal team said that the changes, were only done because they were legally permitted, given the definition that was in the law. So we can't just do everything ourselves. But, to remove the word protein, I really couldn't see any justification for doing that. I mean, a test comprising a protein analysis is equally as potentially life-saving to a patient who's going to undergo chemotherapy from a drug with tremendous side effects as one that analyzes RNA or DNA potentially. So what can you do? You're in the right place right now. You're, getting a presentation about this. It's a huge opportunity to create a playing field for your company where the reimbursement rules are better than they've been. The MACs potentially won't be able to beat you up on price the way they have for a lot of products that have come out using code stacking or gap filling pricing methods, which in some cases has brought the price from a laboratory test down by more than 80% from where the developer wanted the test to be priced. Normally when you're developing a reimbursement strategy or reimbursement-driven commercialization strategy for a product, you have the rules already kind of laid out. It's like being given a hand to play in a game of cards, and you're playing bridge, and you have to play the cards to win the game of bridge. In this case, you're being handed cards, and right now, with this rule still being open, you have a chance to redefine what that game is. You might have a hand that's much better for pinochle. So the time to look at this, if you're in this space, is right now. What will the strategy be? The process that we go through is something called an environmental scan. The environmental scan now has been handed to us via this federal registration publication. You can read it. The link's in the beginning. It's 37-page, triple-column, densely worded government publication. You can get through it and begin to understand it. Or you can ask for help too, and we'll be happy to help. I guess the question I would have is, do you want to be part of the process and comment on these proposed rules, which would be due no later than November 24th? An innovative lab service provider developing or currently marketing an LDT, may be left out and not be eligible for an ADLT. That's one of the concerns if you choose not to comment. Another foundation of strategy is scenario planning. What if some of the current proposals remain the same and some change? Could definitions change? Could timing shorten or lengthen? 2 years of having free reign over pricing versus 3 years. Should the product development and marketing consider ideal outcomes and also problematic ones? What does it mean for your products? And how much senior management time should be diverted addressing these upcoming changes? And could outside experts help? Those are questions for you. I'm fortunate enough to now provide reimbursement support to over 150 companies along with my colleagues. And I can tell you that reimbursement is unique for each lab. The ideal reimbursement strategy is based on the details of how reimbursement works for that disease, for that test, for that benefit category, for that type of insurer, for that jurisdiction. It's different for military patients than for those with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and different tests appeal to different market segments. So what we do is sweat the details, try to figure out what it takes for a valuable test to reach patient that needs it can benefit from the information. we can't cover everything that might be relevant to your company's own situation, during this call. But hopefully, the things I've reviewed here provided, some background on what this law is, what PIM is, and why it may be very important for your company. The reimbursement is always driven by your particulars, not broad generalities, but the broad generalities define the playing field that you have to operate under. And right now it's in a state of flux. And if there are unintended consequences of some of the things that are in there that can be adjusted, you have an opportunity to do that. This brief introduction is just part of the process of how you assess, plan, and act. Certainly wish you great luck with anything that you need to do here. So I thank you for your time and attention. And anything that you need to do, or if you want help, I hope you'll feel free to, send me an email, or my email address is there. And I'm available now to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for that informative presentation. Before we get started on the question and answer session, I'd like to remind our audience how to submit questions. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found by clicking on the green Q&A button at the lower left of the presentation window. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. And our first question is there an important bottom line to these proposed Medicare rules? And if so, what is it?
I do see a written question here. Is there an important bottom line to these proposed Medicare rules? And if there is, what is it? That's a really good question. Medicare is gradually shifting the clinical lab fee schedule to one based on actual commercial test sales. That's kind of the bottom line. It's a market-based calculation rather than one that may use traditional CMS approaches like gap filling or crosswalking to an existing code. Many current providers don't like the current system because they end up having their test underappreciated when the CLFS comes out for their particular test. So this new system, the bottom line is we're going from a process-driven system to define payment to one that's based on market realities. Thank you.
What tests do ALTs include, and what is the difference compared with MDTs? We may be having a little sound difficulty, so I will repeat that one. What tests do ALTs include, and what is its difference compared with MDTs?
Thank you. I heard that perfectly this time. An ADLT is defined by PAMA and the rule that just came out. It is the Advanced Diagnostic Laboratory Test is an indication that you meet the criteria for preferential payments for several year period of time and can access the market-based reimbursement system that will be in the future. So that's a new definition. And a molecular diagnostic test could be an ADLT or it may not be an ADLT. One is kind of based on science. What does the test comprise? An ADLT provides information that indicates that it's eligible for a certain payment category. So, I hope that answers your question there.
The next question is, how will CMS define the scope of the market, in quotes, for the reporting requirement and to calculate market-based pricing?
Well, first of all, I think we can influence that based on what the comments are that they receive. What we do know about it so far is the calculation method that they propose. So, which is to use the mean pricing based on the information they receive to establish the reimbursement level. And let me see if I caught the whole question there. And as far as the particulars for an individual circumstance, it may be different if there's more than one lab and so on. So, and how they average that. But generally they'll take all the tests and calculate a median level, and that's the base that they'll use. But the information they collect in 2016 would be analyzed in part of the rulemaking process in 2017 and then incorporated into the fee schedule in 2018. I'd like to point out that process of using economic information collected in 1 year, analyzed in the second year, and incorporated into the fee schedule in the third year is the same basic philosophy that they use for hospital inpatient payment and for hospital outpatient payment right now. It's a little trickier because they calculate costs indirectly by using charges and then reducing it through a formula that they derive. But the basic concept is the same. How much did it cost based on their best methodology available? And they're saying their best methodology of determining the market is to have manufacturers tell them of these diagnostic tests, tell them how much they're getting paid, and using that information.
If there are no more questions, I would like to once again thank Jerry Stringham for his presentation. Do you have any final comments, Jerry?
Well, I'd just like to repeat, this is a seminal moment for labs and the way that reimbursement is set. If you're a hospital inpatient administrator, you remember when DRGs came into play. If you deal with a hospital outpatient, you remember when APCs started. And in the lab schedule, in the lab introduction process. What an ADLT is, you'll remember 2015 and the implementation of that in 2016. I think it's a good thing to understand what is happening and where it's going to go, and how it affects your company is very complicated, and but it's worth trying to understand it and what the key attributes are going to be for you to be a success in this new market-driven pricing world. So understanding what your clinical, more than what your clinical validity and utility is, and how to overcome reimbursement barriers and still the coverage barriers that come with this system. So, I thank you for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about this. I think it's an exciting but a bit frightening time. So, but mostly it's good news, I think. So I encourage you to get involved and take advantage of it to help your tests, help the patients that were designed to help. So thank you for your attention, and feel free to look us up if we can be of any help. Thanks.
Thank you. Today's webcast will be available on demand for today's webcast will be available for on-demand viewing through May 11th, 2016. You will receive an email from LabRoots alerting you when this webcast will be available for replay. We invite you to forward that announcement to your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. See you next time. Goodbye.